Hello everybody, it's Adrian Plus here,
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
and here we are, and it's number, no, have we worked it out? 87.
87.
Okay, 87. And we have had quite a lot of stuff from people, which we're always very grateful for.
We are.
Including a long joke, and the lady who sent it knows who I'm talking about. I haven't seen this joke for some time. But next week I'm going to tell it when I've mastered it, so I'm not reading it off the paper. So you'll have to wait.
Well, we're
wait till
waiting then, aren't we?
next Friday, which will be interesting.
Yeah, we heard from somebody we've heard from before who we thought lived in Northern Ireland, but it turns out lives in Scotland. And that's always interesting to hear from him. And I don't know, and one or two people for whom things are really pretty jolly, I don't know the words, difficult will do at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that's going to continue for probably as long as we're around, I guess. But
yes,
there's a lot of laughter too, and a lot of other stuff, and
of course
a great richness, I think, in the variety of people who we talk to.
Yeah.
And I think laughing is something people do have in common, really.
Wow,
something that
it's pretty
helps
essential, really, isn't it?
Yeah. It's been, this week has been odd, hasn't it? It's been.
It feels as though every week has a kind of word that is significant, and this one, do you know? I can't think how many times I've heard the word culture, the culture of things, and it isn't to do with how we've always thought of the word culture, you know, that you're into opera or modern art or something. It's to do with, is it maybe the DNA of organisations? I mean, the government has obviously cropped up, but there's been a huge amount in the UK about the Metropolitan Police, most of which is unbelievably depressing, to be honest. And they've talked about this culture.
Yeah, you're right. It's about the fundamental DNA of groups, and we know that when people start talking about culture a lot, it usually means that the meaning has gone slack.
Yeah.
And that people are saying, well, what do we mean by that, and how do we improve it if it's gone wrong?
Yeah.
But it's a concept that you suddenly have to grapple with.
And it seems to be around a lot at the moment. I mean, even the English cricket team.
Yes, I was reading about that. We were in trouble there because there's a lot of, well, what I read, I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but the culture of the English team who did so badly in Australia has been criticised quite heavily, and there's a suggestion that the leadership might be changed. The cricket team. The problem with all of these things, of course, is that you can't legislate against a culture that's changed. You have to look at it and see what's going on. How can you genuinely, profoundly begin to
I think that's right.
it?
I mean, you said about sacking somebody. I mean, that's a kind of knee-jerk reaction, isn't it? And it also, there's a tendency to want to kind of wash over it. I mean, you know, this idea of a few bad apples, that we're all right really, but there's just a few bad apples making it go wrong. There seems to be a lot of courses around for to send people on.
Yeah, there are. I mean, we've joked about that a lot in the past. I mean, there have been a lot of discipleship courses.
Yeah, that's true.
We've mentioned that in the old days we had this joke about Charles Atlas, you know.
You'll have to explain who he is.
Well, Charles Atlas was
for
Mr.
anybody
Mr.
younger
World,
than us.
Mr. World, and there were little adverts in all the papers saying you should do his dynamic tension course, and you wouldn't have sand kicked in your face on the beach when the tough guys came along. And we joked that you needed to send a letter to him when you'd done the course saying, "Have completed course, please send muscles." And the thing with the discipleship courses is a little bit the same. You might write and say, "Have completed discipleship course, please send Holy Spirit," because if all you've done is do a course, it might be very interesting and useful in some ways.
Yeah.
But if it's not touching the part of you that it's for, it's going to be difficult.
Now that's interesting, isn't it? Because I can imagine for every course that there is about sort of, I don't know, sexism or racism or misogyny, some of these things that seem to be cropping up a lot at the moment, there will be some people who had not realised that that was their thinking, that they'd somehow got almost submerged into this culture that we're talking about of feeling it's maybe okay to feel like that because other people are. So there will be some people for whom a course is the thing that means that they really face it.
Might be a wake up, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody we know has done work in this area. I know in America and in this country, large firms have realised that sexism and bullying in the workplace is a very negative influence on the work they do. I mean, I know there's
I wonder how many millions of pounds they spend researching that.
But it's interesting to think of them running these courses, which the person I'm talking about helps to organise and set up.
Yeah.
Where suddenly people are confronted with the possibility that they have been saying things or doing things that are very, very negative in the midst of a group of people working together.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a suggestion by somebody involved in a very high up way with mental health in this country, saying that they make sure on their interview panels that they have service users in order that they don't just get ambitious people who say the right things.
Do you mean on the interview panel?
Yeah, apparently so. Yeah. And they were saying that we try and look beyond the skill or the talent for the right people. And I'll tell you what though, Adrian. First of all, do you remember that hotel we stayed in where you asked? They were so lovely, weren't they, the people working there?
They were so friendly and so kind. And in my normal over curious way, I asked the manager. I said to the manager, "I am amazed." I said, "Usually, talking about bad apples, which you mentioned earlier, there's usually a bruised apple somewhere in a hotel." And the consistency of the approach to customers was amazing. And I said, "How do you do this? How do you select? How do you find people who will behave like this in a job that's sometimes quite tense and challenging?" And he said, "Well, I've tried various ways in the past, but I've now realised the answer is to employ nice people."
Yes.
And I suppose it's very obvious, although you obviously have to be acute enough to know how people will behave when they're actually in the
position. But I also think that maybe he was not saying something else equally important, which is that he probably managed people very well.
Yeah,
I mean, when you come, I can think of our local co-op. It's got the most lovely atmosphere, and I'm quite sure that's partly because people are being very well treated and valued there. So I don't think it's just that. But when it comes to the church, there isn't a sort of interview process whereby you can say, "Are you nice enough?"
Oh, that's what's wrong with it. I hadn't realised. Oh.
Well, you know.
Yes, and who would the sufferer be in the interviewing body? Who would
But it's true, though. Come on, it is true.
Well, it's not. Yeah, I mean, this is where you can get into terrible trouble, isn't it? Trying to define things about the church. I mean, we've heard people say the church is a family. The church is a group of failures who've found a way of being forgiven. We've heard the church described as a melee of very different people who have in common that they have in some way encountered the teaching or the person of Jesus, which has brought them in, or actually just, and this is no small thing, people who want a community and to be part of it and have discovered. We heard just the other day, didn't we, someone saying the reason he became a Christian or came towards Christianity because he went to a meeting where people were so warm to him and so welcoming, but he wanted to know what was going on. So, it's not easy. Not easy.
I do remember, though, this is a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's no good us kidding ourselves. I mean, some people we don't like, and some people within our churches, of course, we don't. And I was thinking of, and sometimes it can rock. I tell you what I was thinking of. Do you remember the story that John Wimber told? Do you remember? And he He had been working, hadn't he, with a lot of drug addicts.
Well, he was in
and
the music business,
Yeah.
and so that's who he met all the time.
Yeah.
And
he was so excited by his faith, wasn't he? That he
Yeah.
wanted them to be part of it.
he took it seriously, and he invited them to his church, and they came. And the problem was that culture, the one that said, we are here for people, for everybody, was a little difficult for those who already had something they liked and wanted and were happy with. And he particularly tells the story of one lady he discovered in tears at the back of the church, and said, I can't remember exact words, but something like, you've ruined our church, because it went from being an easy place to live in and to be part of,
And to be kind
in, to a place where you had to think very carefully about how you were reacting to people and where they were from, and what the church was becoming. And I actually do understand that. You very easily get into a habit of behaviour and an attitude. And
also, I mean, I was thinking, Adrian, when you're teaching, for example, the really difficult people take up all your time.
Yeah.
And
well, I've
people...
been with you for 50 years, haven't I? It's been a long, long haul.
I'm going to continue to make my point, which is that when you're, it's the naughty children, isn't it, who absorb all the time, all the energy. And within a church, it can be the same thing. The person who is extremely difficult can take up nearly all of the time of the leadership team, or whoever, or the pastoral team. And there's so many other people who are struggling along very quietly, who I'm sure have a great "but what about me" sign inside them. So it isn't easy, it is complex.
It isn't. I mean, one of the things I like about you, one of the few things...
Oh yes, come on.
Is that, I mean, people talk about Jesus the healer, Jesus the this, Jesus the that, but I think Jesus the shoelace tire is one of the most lovely ways of thinking of him, that if you're out for a walk with loads of kids like we used to be sometimes, the person at the front who had very strong legs and was fit was marching along with all the fit kids. It was me in the middle talking about the philosophy of walking and what it really meant to be walking.
No, you were not, but never mind.
There was you at the back tying up the shoelaces of those who wish they hadn't come, and helping the fat ones who weren't able to go very quickly. And so...
But that's
and
quite
all of those groups were perfectly valid.
Absolutely. I mean, that's quite a good image, really, if you think about the church, isn't it? Because you do need the leaders. You do need the enthusiasts. You do need the evangelists. You do need the people with the vision. You do need those people, and you need them to be up there leading, so long as they also realise you need the shoelace tires, you need the people who are struggling along at the back, and you don't leave them behind and let them fall off the end of the and just give up the walk, if you like.
It's very difficult. That I remember saying to somebody who ran an organisation that we knew, she rather said to me, we're having a big party for, she named somebody, because they're leaving next week. And I said, well, that's great. And I said, what about someone else? I said, who was leaving? And they said, well, to be honest, they haven't been a great asset to them. And I said, but the one who hasn't been a great asset started a long, long way behind the one who's got the big party. And it is very easy to say, and again, I understand it. Dear old so-and-so who's been so lovely. We celebrate her being here. The one who has been very difficult started by being incredibly difficult and has gradually learned that a change is a very good thing. So that's not
I mean, I think perhaps what we're talking about is that there needs to be a constant eye for every single one of us on what's going on in the culture of the church we're in, the home group we're in, the whatever it is, that actually what are we fostering? What do we want? Do we want to be the biggest church Do we want to be the one who shows even maybe the most, I don't know, the most spiritual gifts? Do we want to be the one who gets the biggest musicians, and do we want to be the one with the most young people? None of those things in themselves are wrong, are they? But it's a looking at what's going on. Are we moving into a different culture than the one that we started with, or the one that we felt was the nearest to Jesus' teaching?
Well, as you said that, I was remembering somebody. We don't usually mention names, but
I don't think we should.
An old friend of ours called Ian, that's all I'll say. But he ran the men's group at a church where we used to be.
Yes.
And I'm glad to mention his name, really, because he's not around anymore. But he brought something to that group that I've really not seen quite in that form before. He really valued people. When they came in, he would say, "Oh, there's old John. Hey, John, come in. Oh, it's so good to see you."
And he meant it.
This is the big difference.
Yeah.
He wasn't role-playing it. He hadn't got a Christian handbook beside him.
No.
He really, really valued them. And the crucial thing about that, of course, is that until you are valued, it's hard to take criticism. It's hard to listen to people when they tell you off or advise you.
Yeah.
But he had acquired or built a relationship with people that was very, very constructive. So I've never forgotten that.
No, and it came from inside him, didn't it? It
Yeah,
was
it
who
did.
he was.
Yeah,
And but you having said that, Adrian, it's just triggered off a thought in me that do you remember here the welcoming group that was so warm in their welcome when you first arrived in a church, and then the next week going there, and this person who had been so welcoming wasn't welcoming at all anymore, was talking to their friends and not in the least bit interested because they were no longer on the welcoming committee.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes.
No, but it's important.
It happened to a friend of ours as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's important because
difficult.
these things, they do matter. They do matter. Building welcome is building hospitality within yourself.
Yeah.
If everybody's doing their best to, then that's surely going to create a culture of hospitality, or of, I don't know, maybe I'm going off centre a little bit, but we've got to allow difference, haven't we?
Yeah.
Well, we've got to, because we just
Well,
are all very different.
when you think about, I'm sure we've mentioned this before, that the Bible's, the one that our friend Mark has been involved with, the Sailors
It's
Society.
the Sailors Society, yeah.
In London began because someone walked past a church with a sign outside saying no sailors or prostitutes. Well, when you think that the
That's
original
right.
band that Jesus went around with were made up of sailors, prostitutes, tax collectors.
Yeah, the bad apples, some of them, and
somehow everything in this place had got turned on its head.
yes,
So you weren't celebrating anything about the original basis of faith. You were celebrating the fact that you were respectable, and that's our legacy in a lot of churches.
It is. I think, in fairness, there is a desire to change in many churches, isn't there?
Oh,
but,
yeah, and of course there is.
Our differences are rather marked, really.
Yeah, I mean, we were thinking about a bit about tough leadership, weren't we? And I think in almost every church we've been, one of the major differences has been the leadership in the church. And whether it should or shouldn't be, that is the case. And the church we go to now, one of the reasons that we were particularly attracted to it, and I remember it very well, was on the very first day we were there, the person leading it said, "I've sent an email to everybody saying that we do not want gossip in this church." Now, with any sense, you'll realise that isn't going to stop all the gossip in the church.
No, but it's laying down a
It's
marker.
laying down a marker. It's saying, this is what we're aiming at.
Yeah.
And
we are not going to allow this, because this can create a culture of quite nasty gossip. And it's so easy, isn't it, as we've said before, really?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's absolutely right.
Yeah. You know, it's some time ago. I heard from somebody. There isn't the time to go into it all, but she was gay, and she joined this church, and she'd been quite open about who she was, without pushing it down anybody's throats or anything like that. She just was saying, well, that's who I am.
Yeah.
And she said that at first these people were so nice that in order to be welcoming, they kept making a special fuss of her in order to show how much, even if they didn't agree with her,
Yeah.
and some of them very strongly felt
Yeah.
they couldn't agree with the lifestyle she was in, but they always sort of made a big fuss. And she said there was one particular day where she ended up on what she called the wonky chair, and she said suddenly she felt she'd really belonged round this kitchen table, not on the special chair set aside for people who you want to value, because that's what you're trying to do, but being in the middle of it, laughing with people around a table.
Yeah. What a relief.
Oh, it must have been
To be on the
most
wonky chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's not a course of hospitality.
No.
It's saying, as a group of people, you know, we may not even agree. We may agree, but we may not with who you are and what you're saying, but you're one of us.
I do remember years ago someone talked to me about the church. I was quite young then, I think. I was still in my teens probably. About the church being a bit like a hospital where you go into the ward and in one bed there's somebody who's really doing well, out of bed on their feet, exercising, ready to go into action again. And then in another one there's someone who's doing quite well but not quite there yet. And in another one somebody who's nothing. They're just slumped in bed with tubes stuck in them and unable to move. And all of those people are cared for and wanted and looked after, and they're all moving towards some place where they will be better off and more healthy in some way. And it also reminds me just a little bit briefly of the old Monty Python thing about the Richard III ward, where all the actors who overdid the acting were recovering from saying a horse, a horse. Oh, one was saying a horse, my kingdom for a horse, because he was almost okay, and one at the other end of the spectrum was saying a horse, my kingdom for a horse, and then all the degrees between. But it's exactly the same thing, really. I don't know whether that
Adrian Plass,
works or not.
One minute we are talking very seriously and deeply about the hospital and the love that's needed, and we end up with Monty Python, but that's where we've ended up. We'd love to hear from you if any of those things have struck a chord, and Adrian is going to tell you this very complicated joke.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you this joke. Yeah, okay.
So we'll speak to you
see you next
soon.
week.
Bye bye.